faithfully conveying value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally talking about books. Today, the book we're interpreting for you is sociologist Fei Xiaotong's The System of Reproduction. When it comes to the reproduction system, some might say it's just about men and women marrying, having kids, and raising them to adulthood. Isn't that just natural? But others might think, no matter what policies the government rolls out, like two-child or three-child policies, I'm sticking to not marrying or having children. What's your take? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Actually, the reproduction system isn't some natural given, it's a rational setup in human society. As a master of Chinese sociology and anthropology, Fei Xiaotong believed that the reproduction system involves a series of social activities like marriage, reproduction, and child rearing. The resulting family structures, spousal bonds, parent-child ties, intergenerational passing down, and kinship systems are all man-made institutional arrangements and social culture. The whole point of these setups is to pass on the race across generations, ensure continuity, and keep the social structure stable. Fei Xiaotong's view was heavily influenced by the functionalist school. He studied under Bronislaw Malinowski, a giant in anthropology and the functionalist school, early in his career. Functionalism basically sees society as a structured system. All parts of society are connected in an orderly way and play essential roles for the whole. Under Malinowski's guidance, Fei Xiaotong finished his doctoral thesis, Peasant Life in China, and aced the defense. The English version of this book came out in London and New York back in 1939. Widely acclaimed globally, Fei Xiaotong returned to China in 1938, taught at Yunnan University and Southwest Associated University, and ran courses on family issues. His lecture notes were later turned into a book published in 1947, which is The System of Reproduction we're covering today, split into 16 chapters. Next up, I'll break it down into 4 parts. The reproduction system, marriage system, family triangle dynamics, and social structure. Let's start with how the reproduction system came to be. Fei Xiaotong saw human society as a fully structured, functional organic whole where individuals are integral parts. Their lives and work depend on this complete social setup, which is clear-cut and concrete. First off, the gender ratio needs to stay balanced. If it gets out of whack, it causes all sorts of social issues like lower marriage rates, higher crime, and more instability. And secondly, the age structure must also be balanced. For example, many cities in China have entered deep aging, where socioeconomic development gradually loses the momentum of population growth and the demographic dividend it brings. Finally, occupational division can't be imbalanced either. Some deliver packages, some work in factories, others join the public sector. Clearly, humanity has greatly utilized the economic principle of division of labor, the fundamental reason we separated from lower animals to form fully structured human societies. And then, also, in a complete social structure relies on population equilibrium. But people inevitably die, disrupting this balance, requiring new individuals to repair the damaged social structure. From an individual perspective, maybe you only care about your lifetime. Who cares what happens after? Yet to maintain your life, you must preserve social structure integrity. Otherwise, as others die, division of labor collapses. Ultimately, you're affected too, so society needs a metabolic mechanism. So where do new people come from? Through reproduction. Reproduction involves 2 stages, procreation and nurturing. First, procreation, the formation of new life. New individuals emerge through human reproductive functions. New beings from old, ensuring racial continuity. Next, nurturing, raising offspring to ensure healthy development. Then, they learn productive skills, join social division of labor, and create new individuals themselves. But human reproduction conflicts with individual interests. In procreation, sex brings pleasure individually. As Confucius said, food and sex are human nature. Sex is instinctive, but resulting reproduction is risky. classic self-sacrifice. For women bearing reproductive functions, pregnancy causes mobility issues and body changes. Modern women face job loss, income reduction, even death during childbirth. Even in 2021 China, 16 mothers died per 100,000 births. Thus, humans instinctively avoid reproduction to break the sex to procreation cycle. Research shows that even indigenous people on isolated Pacific islands used coitus interruptus for contraception, while modern birth control allows people to enjoy sex without worrying about unintended pregnancy. But from a social structure perspective, maintaining human continuity requires reproduction.
This creates conflict between individual interests and societal needs, resolved through the reproduction system.
Throughout history, societies developed this solution, making self-sacrificing reproduction a social institution as a safeguard for racial continuity. As mentioned earlier, pro-natal policies address individual mortality versus racial continuity and societal sustainability, adding new individuals to maintain social stability. But adding new individuals requires maternal nurturing. For humans, mothers endure 10-month pregnancies, and newborns depend on breast milk for survival. This process falls solely on mothers, called unlineal nurturing. Meanwhile, children need comprehensive life education and cultural socialization to become functional members of society. This lengthy process, at least 18 years, requires both parents' cooperation. Bilineal nurturing. Since nurturing requires both genders, institutional safeguards for this bilineal cooperation became necessary. Thus emerged the marriage system, long-term unions forming spouses and families. Like many sociologists, Fei Xiaotong valued marriage's economic basis, but emphasized more its role as a social institution where man and woman become spouses committed to long-term cohabitation for child rearing. Marriage's essence is to ensure new individuals' growth, secure bilineal nurturing, and maintain social structure integrity. Let's examine this specifically. First, marriage reconciles the sex-society conflict. Satisfying human sexual desires often clashes with maintaining stable social structures. Sex is biological impulse, but unchecked. It leads to socially unethical acts like non-marital cohabitation, prostitution, infidelity, unregulated behaviors conflicting with marriage, ultimately disrupting child-rearing and social stability. The marriage system confines sexual activity within marital relationships. The Marriage and Family section of China's Civil Code, effective since 2021, contains strict provisions against extramarital sex, such as prohibiting bigamy and cohabitation while married. These mandatory laws constrain extramarital relations to provide institutional safeguards for effective child rearing by couples. Secondly, the marriage system provides security for reproduction. Now, reproduction is always marriage-based. Social customs dictate that only married women have the right to bear children. Fatherless children rely solely on maternal care and often lack full social rights. Illegitimate children face societal discrimination. Additionally, marriage establishes a child's social father, given the existence of extramarital relations. A married woman's child may not biologically belong to her husband, but marriage legally binds spouses, thereby determining parent-child relationships. Thus, husbands bear legal obligations even for children born from wives' affairs. Denying paternity requires legal procedures. Thus, marriage links spousal and parental ties, ensuring children become qualified new members of society. Moreover, to ensure quality of new members, marriage prohibits endogamy, meaning incestuous unions. Instead, it implements exogamy, marrying outside one's group. This not only safeguards newborn health, but also fosters intergroup cooperation and cultural exchange. Thus, marriage reconciles sex-society conflicts, unifying biological impulses with social duties, providing institutional security for transforming biological beings into social beings. That's its function. For a couple, the most perfect marital life is harmonious, where Societal cooperation needs align with emotional fulfillment, creating harmony. Fei Xiaotong called this qi, the unity of individual and societal needs. Spousal relationships most require qi since couples interact across countless life aspects. In Chinese society, spousal cooperation historically emphasized practical tasks over emotional fulfillment. Confucianism holds that weakening life's pleasures and emotional satisfaction enables effective child rearing. In fact, traditional Chinese society didn't prioritize spousal affection. Relationships like Mao Shang and courtesan Deng Xiaoan in The Peach Blossom Fan or the absurd sexual dynamics in Jin Ping Mei prove ancient men often sought emotional connections outside marriage. To stabilize marital bonds and achieve qi, societies historically used trial marriages, early marriages, and child brides to improve husband-wife dynamics. After industrialization, men and women began seeking emotional fulfillment through free choice romantic partners. But whether romance leads to marriage depends on aligning personal feelings with reproductive responsibilities. And in reality, free love couples often feel conflicted as emotional desires clash with societal duties. Shifting marriage from solely practical focus to purely emotional pursuit, making feelings its core function, undermines stability. In other words, treating romance as unconditional attraction while ignoring social structures inevitably makes marriage the grave of such romance. Socially speaking, while humans have romantic urges, reproduction is the fundamental duty, the lifelong commitment. Within this reproduction-centered culture, shared child-rearing fosters deeper marital qi than fleeting romance. Ultimately, for societal renewal, humanity must reproduce members through biological procreation and social nurturing, both requiring cultural sanction.
Marriage establishes families to enable procreation and nurturing, making families essential for societal metabolism.
Beyond creating spousal bonds, marriage generates another vital relationship: parent-child ties. A child's birth gives spouses shared work and shared future. Children represent both biological union and emotional bonding between spouses. Hence the saying, children are marriage's glue. Spousal plus parent-child ties form triangular stability within families. This is what Fei Xiaotong called the family triangle, the fundamental unit of human society. On one hand, spouses establish comprehensive long-term cooperation to jointly nurture and educate children. On the other, parent-child relationships assign children the nurtured role, enabling them to learn life skills within the family and become functional social members. Through parent-child bonds, conflicts between birth rearing and education are resolved. In other words, a child's birth stabilizes spousal cooperation, while parent-child ties reinforce family structure. So how can couples ensure proper child rearing? Fei first approached this spatially through nuclear families, extended families, and communities. As human behavior and emotions are hard to measure, scholars often infer social distance from physical proximity. Fei's concept of residential dispersion. Observing families residentially involves two aspects: parent-child spatial relationships and nuclear extended family dynamics. In nuclear families, spouses cohabit but occupy distinct spaces, like men working outside, women managing domestically. Historically, spousal boundaries were strict, like in Dream of the Red Chamber, when Jia Zhang caused tension by sitting with daughters during Lantern Festival, crossing gendered space boundaries until grandmother Jia dismissed him. In the same place, post-reform China saw rural men working away while women raised children at home. Parent-child bonds naturally loosen as children mature. Historically, this meant separate bedrooms. Now children leave for education or work. True residential dispersion after byline or nurturing completes. Eventually, children become adults, leave their nurturing group to start families and enter society, gradually severing parent-child ties. Now consider extended families. In China, 3 generations, grandparents, parents, children, often cohabitate. We call parent-child units nuclear families and broader kinship groups extended families. Yet even extended families comprise multiple nuclear units, so both share identical core structures. Grand families like the Gia Manor in Dream of the Red Chamber, despite having nearly 100 descendants, still maintained each household as an independent unit. These diverse families ultimately formed communities, each with potentially different social divisions of labor. But the social structure must remain complete to fulfill everyone's basic needs. Thus, each community must accommodate maximum population and continuously integrate new members. However, new members require training before gaining formal societal membership. In other words, children undergo socialization through phenomena like generational gaps, social weaning, and coming of age rituals, gradually transitioning into qualified societal members. First, let's examine generational gaps. Fei Xiaotong believed people constantly navigate conflicts between their ideal and actual selves. Through child rearing, parents project ideal selves onto offspring, resolving personal conflicts while providing emotional security for the nurturing system by viewing children as self-extensions. But this plants seeds for parent-child conflict. Generational gap. Why? Parents' ideals reflect societal expectations. The reality, ideal gap mirrors individual society divergence. When imposing ideals on children, parents use societal standards to suppress biological instincts incompatible with society. And thus biology-society conflicts transform into teacher-student conflicts. Parent-child struggles.
For instance, children often misunderstand parents, perceiving interference or oppression.
Evolving societal ideals create clashes between generations' differing standards. Since the May 4th movement, Chinese youth saw parents representing man-eating feudalism, social upheavals scattering parent-child bonds during cultural renewal. Yet cultural continuity involves painful transitions for parent-child relationships. Fei Xiaotong called it social weaning. Let's see how in the family triangle, children grow up and leave the nurturing system to start their own families. The formation of a new family means the end of the old family, the breakdown of the old family triangle, and the child severing ties. This process is social weaning, distinct from biological weaning, also called the second weaning. Social weaning is a necessary step in becoming a qualified member of society. A child who stays too long in the family environment will struggle to adapt to competitive situations outside. In their early years, children are protected by parents. Family members are willing to support them, at least for their benefit. But in competitive situations, it can be life or death. And ruthless. This is what we often call getting beaten by society. However, as adults, they can't live under parental protection anymore. They must independently shoulder social responsibilities and truly become new members of the social structure. This brings us to coming-of-age ceremonies, which signify letting go of parents, preparing to take responsibility for life, and the dissolution of the family triangle as a cooperative group. Coming-of-age ceremonies are common in primitive societies or among indigenous people in Africa and Australia. Children undergo isolation in these ceremonies to accept new social powers, dominance, and form new moral understandings. They transition from one state to another, requiring a psychological shift. This is the purpose of coming-of-age ceremonies. Children emerge from home to become social members, make friends outside the family circle, are recognized and accepted by society, and ultimately leave the original family triangle. In modern society, going to university, starting work, or joining the military also serve as coming-of-age ceremonies. Ultimately, through coming-of-age ceremonies, children gradually transition into social beings, becoming socialized new members of society. This process prepares them for the metabolic nature of social structure. Social structure refers to the replacement of old members by new ones in human society.
This differs from the replacement of old individuals by new ones in racial continuity. Social structure requires rules, otherwise it would cause chaos.
These rules include various obligations and rights of social positions towards things and people, as well as the work performed. So, thus, it's passed down through generations to maintain social structure, integrity, and individual lives. There are many ways to structure society, like primogeniture mandated by rights, the most common ancient method. For instance, in Water Margin, Chao Gai's dying wish was that only his avenger could lead Liangshan. Even some Zheng who monopolized power dared not object. If inheritance isn't handled properly, social structure stability gets disrupted. Just like in the Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber, when Ming cult leader Yang Dingtian died suddenly, no heir named, no will found, causing the cult to split over succession fights. In Fei Xiaotong's view, social structure is key to the entire reproduction system. The family triangle provides socialization training for forming societal members, helping kids transition smoothly into social individuals. But as life complexities grow, nurturing shifts beyond the family unit, expanding into a blood-tied 3D social structure, the kinship system. Under the kinship system, social succession has two key phenomena: generational discrepancy and unlineal emphasis. First is generational discrepancy. This concept, unique to Fei Xiaotong, means social succession isn't direct generation to generation, but skips generations. Contrary to our habit of thinking sequential, grandfather passes to father, father to son. New societal entrants take rights from their nurturers. Actually, the father is just a mediator. The pattern goes directly from grandfather to grandson in a traditional family. And in a three-generation household, when grandfather retires, grandchildren are often adults ready to work. But fathers, in their prime, won't hand over property and rights to sons. They monopolize power, taking some rights as youth enter society, sparking father-son conflicts like household division. In a stable social state, though the next family may divide, grandparents and family property goes to grandchildren. In modern society, adulthood comes later, and kinship systems are often abandoned as inheritance principles. For example, someone might not have kids until after 30. At 60, with kids just starting careers, it's hard for them to take over his substantial business. Mature youth waste their prime in preparation, practicing late marriage, even to the point where marriage's essence fades. Since reform and opening up, China became the fastest nation in global higher education expansion, greatly enhancing human resources, but accelerating delayed marriage and childbearing trends. Secondly, beyond generational discrepancy, succession principles also exhibit unlineal emphasis. Parental nurturing is bilineal, but children's succession shows unilineal emphasis. Unlineal emphasis means equal affection between both parents and children. Yet property inheritance goes solely to sons when transferring family assets. Daughters can't inherit property. This special inheritance method's advantage is simplicity. Just distribute assets equally among sons. But multiple sons create the many succeedingly few problem: how to allocate property across generations. Historically, three solutions emerged: population control, birth order sequence, and fratricidal competition. Population control balances social structure integrity with efficiency. Underpopulation reduces social efficiency, hindering development. Overpopulation fragments social structure, causing resource strain and declining living standards. Guizhou's Dong ethnic Zanli people practiced planned population control since ancient times to avoid the many succeeding dilemma. They believed one tree can only support one sparrow nest. Two nests starve. Thus, village elders mandated one couple, one son, and one daughter. Violators faced property confiscation or expulsion. Historically, infanticide maintained population stability. The second method is birth order sequence, distributing property by seniority. To minimize disputes, societies established primogeniture, eldest inherits, or ultimogeniture, youngest inherits. UK and Japan long practiced primogeniture. Eldest inherited all real estate, younger sons got movable assets only. In Crayon Shin-chan, Shin-chan's father, a second son, left for Tokyo to make his living. In Jane Eyre, the male protagonist Rochester is a second son. His father couldn't share property with him, so he married him off to a wealthy madwoman. But this triggered a series of tragedies. Nomadic peoples like the Mongols historically practiced ultimogeniture, youngest son inheritance. When Genghis Khan died, his youngest son, Tolui, became regent, while eldest son, Jochi, had to establish his own khanate. When neither method resolves inheritance, fratricidal conflict emerges, brothers fighting over property. These stories are familiar to all. And, during the Three Kingdoms period, Cao Pi and Cao Zi battled for the throne, common in ancient times. Modernly, especially in rural areas, brothers often sever ties over property division, sometimes leading to murder. With China's 2-3 child policies, the many succeeding few inheritance issue is gaining attention. Many succeeding few addresses having many children, but childlessness is worse, though couples can adopt. In Lord of the Rings, Bilbo Baggins adopted Frodo as heir, leaving him the ring and bag end. Similarly, Emperor Gaozong of Song, able to bear children after trauma, adopted Emperor Taozu's seventh-generation descendant, who became Emperor Shaozong as his adopted son. In ancient China, formal adoption within clans was more common than general adoption. Formal adoption means accepting a relative's child as heir when meeting descendants, establishing parent-child bonds. Empress Dowager Cixi adopted her nephew for Emperor Shanfang, later known as Emperor Guangxu. Beyond adoption, families with daughters but no sons often use matrilocal marriage, recently popularized in son-in-law novels and TV dramas. Earlier, we noted kinship systems extend from family foundations. In reality, parental work, finances, illness, or death often disrupt child rearing. To continue nurturing, a group with emotional bonds must serve as backup caregivers. This is the kinship system. And thus, kinship extends nurturing functions, a system radiating from the family triangle core, emotional and flowing tone, metachoresol. As living proximity increases, shared life cultivates intimate kinship networks, becoming channels for nurturing's diffusion. Kinship expands in 2 layers. First, to grandparents forming bilateral circles based on mutual support. The second layer extends beyond practical help to legally maintained kinship, the clan system. Though clans extend from family kinship, their core shifts from nurturing to economic or political cooperation, including exogamy between clans to oversee succession principles. Thus, analyzing kinship expansion, Fei Aotong built an entire theoretical framework centered on reproduction systems. In this family-centered society, the core remains the parent-child triangle, fulfilling nurturing functions. From this extends kinship relations. Beyond that, social structure expands to non-kin relationships. Historically, China saw sworn brotherhoods like the Oath of the Peach Garden, strengthening solidarity for mutual aid. The family triangle forms community structures through kinship systems, rippling outward like water circles. This is the differential mode of association from the soil, finally forming complete human societies. All right, let's summarize this book. Fei wrote this during the anti-Japanese War when conflict and disasters threatened human survival and civilization. Concerned with cultural continuity, the 30-something Fei ambitiously sought society's fundamental truths. The system of reproduction answers how traditional societies sustain and transmit themselves across generations. In this sense, understanding From the Soil requires reading The System of Reproduction. Simultaneously, this work best represents Fei's academic thought. Unlike the community study Peasant Life in China, it's a comprehensive sociological treatise. Starting from family, it expands to human civilization's enduring continuity, laying foundations for China's indigenous sociology. Even though this book was published over 70 years ago, it's still a vital tool for understanding real-world issues today.
Domination, urgent and insightful deliver. breakdown of family triangles, and the rise of non-marriage lifestyles remain profoundly relevant and worth revisiting.
After hearing this, have your views on marriage and reproduction shifted at all?
Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. All right, that wraps up our discussion of Fei Xiaotong's system of reproduction. Reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.